Hi, welcome to JWest Engineering. Today I'm going to be demonstrating installing the RennShift Performance Shifter. First part of my demonstration, I'm going to be showing the removal of the shifter. I'm not going to do it from a car where it's kind of hard to see. I have a test rig here where you can kind of get an idea of what's up underneath. This one is a later version of the 915 shifter, but the demo will apply to any of the 911 style shifters that we have replacement for, which is this 1965 up to 86, 901 and 915 911s. And then it also covers the tail shift 914s and the original 914 6s. Use the same type shifter. So to demonstrate removing the shifter, I'm going to start by removing the bolts that hold the bracket. As you can see up underneath here in the floor, there's a bracket that holds the shift rod bushing, and then there's your shift rod. And so we take out the two smaller bolts right behind the tower that hold that bracket. We take those bolts out, nothing will happen because the bracket is trapped between the floor and the shifter. Then we move on to the front two bolts. Remove those. And then we'll remove the rear bolt, which attaches both the shifter and the shift rod bracket. Now we'll lift the shifter straight up, and that'll disengage the shift rod bushing from the cup that's down on the floor. And take that on out of the car. Now in the car, your shift rod will keep extending back to the transmission. It'll be trapped between that, the shift rod will be trapped below the floor. And so you won't be able to lift it and take it out. In this case, because I'm using a Divo and I have a cut off shift rod, we'll just move this out of the way. Now that we've removed the old shifter, we'll move on to checking out the RennShift. Open up the box. We've got an assembly guide that comes with it. There's a package of hardware. So I'll go through this for you, show you what's here. This one is a manual reverse lockout kit. This is an optional accessory that comes with every shifter. The automatic reverse lockout is installed standard, and this optional manual reverse lockout can be installed if you'd like to. Next thing in the packet is a set of shims that are used for the bias springs. If you want the side-to-side springing to be stiffer than it is as delivered, you can use these springs to shim it up. These shims to shim up the springs. Next is a pair of set screws that are used as shifter stops. So these give a positive stop internally to the shifter stick, and that can save wear and tear on your bushings and linkage and the internals of the transmission. Then we've got the basic hardware. We've got 3 M8 bolts and 3 M8 washers. These are to hold down to the floor. Some of your earlier shifters have sheet metal housings and really short bolts, so we include the bolts of the right length to go with the RennShift. We have a pair of M6 bolts and their matching washers. These go through the shifter into the rod bracket that we took out earlier. And then we have 4 flathead for countersunk holes M6 bolts, and these are to hold the shifter RennShift shifter housing to its base plate. We'll see that in just a minute. Here we have the RennShift base plate. Next we have the upper stick. This version is the standard length stick. This one is the same height and angle as the stock shifter, so it puts the knob right where it would with the original shifter. We also have the extended 2-inch extended version, and what that does is adds length to the shifter up at the top, the shift stick at the top, so the knob ends up 2 inches further up along this angle, so a little bit further back and higher than the factory knob. Next we have the main shift tower or housing of the shifter and the boot. So set the boot over to the side and take a look at the main shifter housing. It's got the shift rod bushing already installed, and as you can see if you look down in here, it's got the automatic reverse lockout. Now the key here for the installation is to install the reverse lockout in the proper position to go with the transmission you're using. The shifter can only go one of two ways because of the hole pattern that you see right here. In this position, it's to the driver's side and forward, and that'll be for a 901 transmission where that's the location of reverse. If you spin it around 180 degrees, that puts it in the position for the 915, where reverse is away from you over to the passenger side and to the rear. And so we're going to set it up as a 915 transmission today because that's the shifter we pulled out. So we want to remain consistent. So we'll line those holes up, drop the bolts in. These are the countersunk M6s. We use a 4mm Allen. If you want to use some blue Loctite on these, that would be fine. We're going to tighten those down, and then if you want to, you can torque them to 10 Newton meters. At this point, it's ready to install in the car. Okay, so we make our way back out to the car, shifter in hand. And to install the shifter into the car, we just look at the cup in the floor, and we've got the ball cup bushing on the bottom of the shifter. We line those two, drop the cup bushing down into the cup, and push the shifter down to the floor. Now we look through all three holes in the back of the shifter here and see that we get them aligned. You can use a tool to kind of make the plate align all three holes so that that L bracket that supports the rod bushing is aligned. Take the two M6 bolts and washers that come in the kit, start to screw those into the rod bracket, get those started a bit, and then the three M8s with washers, we'll screw the shifter down to the floor. Go ahead and screw all these down, get them snugged. The M8s use a 6mm Allen, and it's 5mm Allen for the two M6s. Screw those down. They're not critical to torque those. You want them tight. If you really want to torque them, the spec is 10 Newton meters on the two small ones, and on the three larger ones, 25 Newton meters. Once that's down and tight, then we take the shift stick and install that. Just drops down into place. Now, another adjustment that the RennShift has is rotation of this stick. So it doesn't have to be lined up straight with the car. The factory ones are actually offset slightly toward the driver, but depending on your seating position, the design of your seat, personal preference, and all those things, you may want to move it left or right to have the knob end up in a slightly different position. And then use a 4mm Allen wrench and tighten those down. These set screws that, 2 set screws that hold, make sure that it's all the way down so that both set screws have a good good contact on the shaft coming up. These set screws are serrated on the bottom to lock them in place, so they won't give you a real accurate torque to torque them with a torque wrench, but you want to snug them very tight, and then go for a drive and use the shifter a few times to kind of work it a bit, and come back and tighten them again, and maybe do that 2 or 3 times to make sure they take a good set. After you've done your that initial tightening, then an adjustment, alignment of the shifter with the transmission, adjustments of springs and all those things I'll get into in another video. I'm not going to cover that here, but I'll go ahead and put the boot on after you're comfortable with that you mess with the mechanism all you want to. So we push the boot down. It has a bead in the boot and a groove in the top of the shifter there, top ring, and it'll kind of snap into place. And then in your box, you'll have 2 zip ties, or special low profile zip ties that are in the box. One's for the boot, the other's a spare if you cut it off and replace it later. And you just put the zip tie on there when you're all done to lock the boot down. And that's it. Super easy install. Put a new RennShift in your 911.